Hi everybody, I am Johari, and today is your introduction to genealogy. Now some of you might be familiar with genealogy and others might not be, so today we're going to start with the basics and you'll learn how to research your family tree. Let's talk a little bit about how I researched my family tree. When I started genealogy a long time ago, it was before Windows on the computer, and what we had was called listserv groups where you'd communicate back and forth, or you'd have to go to the library and research there, or you'd even have to travel to the National Archives in your state or even another state and research government documents and other things there. But genealogy research has changed greatly over the years. Now we have the internet, have a lot of websites. You can start researching your genealogy in the morning. By the evening, you can have a family tree all ready to frame and hang up on the wall. But genealogy, just the chart, is not really rich and meaningful unless you know how to research your family and the history that accompanies it. So we're going to learn about that. Okay, we're going to learn how to make genealogy come to life for you. Along the way, we're going to learn how to research hidden clues in common documents, and we're going to learn a lot of neat tricks and little clues along the way. Now, when I first started researching my genealogy, my only focus was finding my grandfather's death and his parents. So when I ordered his death certificate and got that in the mail, my only issue was what can I find out about his parents? Little did I know that one death certificate can lead you to 100 clues or even more, and we're going to learn a little bit about how that all works and how documents will really help you along the way. Okay? Now, let me tell you a little bit about how to research with different ethnic groups. Genealogy is unique to each ethnic group. However, the basics are the same no matter what your ethnicity is. Okay, so you just have to learn the ins and outs of your own country and about your ethnicity, and then you'll be able to research your genealogy no matter what your background, if you know what tools are there for you to use. Okay, well, welcome, and let's get started.
I'm the granddaughter of Mary Lewis and Dennis Green, of Nolewa Adinaku Butler and Tosuto Sossaline Jesse Johnson Jr. I'm the great-granddaughter of Bessie McGee and T.T. Lewis, of Macy Lowry and Maxie Green, of Modupeo Shalamibi and Metahochi Kofi Zana, of Jesse Johnson Sr. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of Gertrude Peterson and Dan McGee, of Sarah Harris and Harmon Charlie Lewis, of Parney Sutton and Sylvester Lowry, of Josephine Myers and Timothy Green, of Emmett and Eddie Redding and Marcella Bates Redding, of Tiny Pearl Jarrett and Jasper Butler, of Francis Hill and Will Wise, of Ed Johnson and Emily Ross. I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frank Peterson and Mary Ford, of George McGee and Eliza McGee, of Green Harris and Hattie Harris, of Huey Lewis and Arthena Lewis, of Charity Freeman and Ned Johnson, of Fannie Chambers and Pye Ross, of Hannah Billingsley and Jordan Hill, of Addie Alexander and Wesley Jarrett, of Ivy Pearl Jones and James Butler. I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of Green Harris and Lizzie Moreau, of Mariah Butler and Alice Henderson. I'm the great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of William, Tom Lewis and Jane Lewis, of Matilda and Henry Ratliff, of Celia, of Joe Butler and Martha Butler, of Lavinia Henderson and Isaac Henderson. I'm the great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Phyllis of Harrison Benson, of John Hunter and Emily Hunter. I have ridden the shoulders of my fathers and mothers to tomorrow. I, Mikelna Jajinaku, the words of my father's drum, the seeds of my mother's calabash, have ridden astride the shoulders of the gods and ancestors to arrive at my today. With confidence and pride, I face all challenges before me as I work for the total independence of my people. My proverb is, no one crosses a river without getting wet. This proverb means that in order to go through any process, you must be willing to go through the struggles and persevere through the struggles.
Okay, first of all, what is genealogy? Okay, it's a word that we hear a lot, but what is it? What genealogy is the account of descent of a person, family, or group from older forms. That's according to the dictionary Merriam-Webster. It is the regular descent of a person or family group from the top to the bottom, from the oldest to the youngest, or it's the study of a family pedigree. It can be the account of the origin and historical development of something. Therefore, genealogy can be as simple as documenting your lineage and vital information on charts and detail that information investigating the family tree. But it's most fulfilling, like I said, when it includes history. Your genealogy project is limited only by the vision of the researcher. Okay, you'll find many handbooks out there about the way to document your family history and to chart that information. There's a lot of different kind of pedigree charts and various documents and guidelines that are uniform standards. You might want to explore those later if you want to plan on publishing your work, but the goal of this course is to help you begin to discover the seeds of your family history. So let's look at some of those ways. Okay, the first rule in genealogy is start with yourself. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you start your chart or start looking at your family history, you're going to look at yourself and write down all the information that you know. For example, when were you born? Where were you born? And then you're going to jot your parents down. Where were they born? When were they born? Okay, but start with yourself so that you have a good foundation of your genealogy. Another reason that I tell you to start with yourself is because a lot of times your own document can have errors in it, and if you don't fix or know about the errors in your own document, it can throw you way off. Let me give you some examples. One of my students learned, for example, he looked at his birth certificate and it showed that he was female. Actually, the person was a male, and that meant that it was a problem when he tried to get into the military, and he went in and he said, I'm a male, and they said, well, sir, ma'am, your birth certificate says that you're a female, so he had to figure out how to correct that. Sometimes the maiden name of the mother is incorrect, and that's really important to trace your family history. You need to know your mother's maiden name because the maiden name is the name that gets put on all your documents. We've had a birthday incorrect on a document. The racial designation was incorrect. It could be a Native American or indigenous person that's listed as white. It could be an African American person that's listed as white or mulatto or Mexican. I've seen that. It depends on who is drawing up that document and how much they know about you, besides just looking at you and making a determination about what you are. So, again, it's important to start with yourself. Make sure that if any of those errors are on your own birth certificate or paperwork, that you correct those so that going forward or going backward, as the case may be in genealogy, you have a good foundation. What you want to do is start your chart. Start with your name on the first line, your parents' name, going up to the second generation, and then do the third generation, and make it as complete as you can. And then after you've done that, you can start doing some in-depth research. Now, in my book, Genealogy and Ethnicity, How to Interpret the Clues, I have several charts in there for your use. I have a family tree chart. I have one filled out as an example that has my family on it. I have a blank one so that you can start your family. I have family group sheets in which you put the name of the mother, the father, and all of the children and where they were born and their birth dates, and that kind of keeps you focused. I have a research log that you can write down what you've already done so that you don't redo your work, which is something I'm guilty of doing a lot because I don't keep up my research chart the way that I need to. And there's also a form in there for documents that you have to order. For example, if you request a birth certificate, or your grandparents or great-grandparents' birth certificate or death certificate. Write down the date when you've requested that, who you've requested it from. That way you know when to expect it back, and you know that you've requested it, because sometimes, a lot of times time goes by and you will forget that you requested that document. So there's a lot of forms in that book to help you out. The forms are also available on places like Ancestry.com. Just go to the search box, type in forms. You can download that and use as many as you like to use. Okay? Okay, let's talk a little bit about the internet. The internet is a great tool to research your family tree. And over the years, some of you may not remember what it was like before internet was available. But over the years, it's evolved, and there are a lot of documents on the internet. But I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking that everything is on the internet, because that's simply not true. As a matter of fact, what I like to say is all the good stuff is in some library somewhere in the basement. Okay, but having said that, the internet has one of the best tools, which is the census report. And that's one of the first things you're going to use when you go to research your genealogy. You're going to research census records from the last one that was released was 1940. You're going to find everybody in your family that you can from the 1940 census on back. And the census has been released every 10 years since 1790. So you'll first research the 1940, then 1930, then 1920, and so on and so forth until you get back. What you want to do when you're doing genealogy research on the internet is you want to verify that information, because a lot of times information on the internet can be placed there from a lot of different people. So you want to make sure that that information is accurate, even if it's on a census record, because sometimes human error transcribe those incorrectly. And so you might want to look at the original document and make sure that everything ties up. You might want to match the census record with a birth or a death record records so that you can get more accurate information about the birth date. Because keep in mind, the census records, there could be a 2 to 3 year difference in what they think the age of the person was and how old the person actually was. You want to read every line of the document so that you don't miss anything. Sometimes we look at one thing on the census records. You want to look and see who the family was next door to where your family lived. It could be your grandmother next door that wasn't, or your great-grandmother that wasn't living with the immediate family. And if you don't, like I say, look around the neighborhood, then you miss a lot. So read over every line, and if you're looking at the census, read over the whole page to see who the neighbors were. Let's talk a little bit about useful websites that you might use for your genealogy. There are a lot of websites. Some of them are free. Some of them will cost you money. So let's go through a few of them and see what else you can use besides Ancestry.com to research your genealogy. Okay, the first one that I like to talk about is Cindy's List. Okay, and I believe it's cindyslist.com or cindyslist.org. But anyway, go to Cindy's List Genealogy. What Cindy's List is a list of lists. It will tell you about a myriad of all the other genealogy sites that you can research your genealogy. Okay, the next one is Ancestry.com. I talk a lot about Ancestry.com. They've been around for, 20 or 30 years. Ancestry.com is a paid site, unlike Cindy's List, which is a free site. But they do have a lot of documents, a lot of help videos, and a lot of resources to help you get through your genealogy. They also offer DNA tests so that if you want to see if you match somebody else's DNA, and that helps with your research, that is available. You can email me and I'll give you some more information about that if that's something that interests you. One of the other biggest websites that you can research is called FamilySearch.org. That one was started by the Latter-day Saints. They have a great big family history library in Salt Lake City, Utah. That one is free because, as some of you may or may not know, the Latter-day Saints believe that tracing your genealogy is key to the afterlife, okay? And so they make a lot of those documents free to the public. Some are not free, but most of them are. Okay, the next one for African American genealogy, Afrogenis.com. Okay, and that is free. Now you will find different people on Afrogenis that you can email, and they will give you some tips. There are a lot of books written by other African American authors, genealogy books that give you some help with that, and it's a great resource for African American genealogy. Okay, you also have US Gen Web, which is a free research site. And what these are volunteers from different towns, different cities that have put together information on their own little town. And you find some nice family histories there. And you might find history or information about your own ancestry, so that's a good one to look at. You want to look at archives.gov. This is the National Archives site. They have several online collections that you could look at. You could also travel to one of the 10 states that does have archives.gov. They have one in Colorado where I am. If you are in Atlanta, they also also have a National Archive site that you can go and do research that's not on the internet, and I believe it's in Englewood, Georgia, if you all are familiar with Englewood. You can go to census.gov. It's a free website. It's a government website. It has a wealth of information about all the census records, non-population schedules, which are census records that are different from who lived there. I mean, they have agricultural schedules and a myriad of other different things. So census.gov is an excellent site. You can go to chroniclingamerica.gov, which is a newspaper website. Also, there is a newspaper website that's excellent that's called newspapers.com. You can look at old newspapers, and they have obituary notices, marriage notices, death notices. They have a lot of information for you. One that I find useful is a site that's called familysearch.com. I was actually surprised at this site. There's so much on it. But you can go to familysearch.com. You can go to findagrave.com and type in the name of a cemetery, and volunteers have actually gone in and made a list of everyone who is in the cemetery in a lot of cases, and sometimes you can actually find pictures of the grave. I found a picture of my grandfather that I never knew existed until I went to his grave, and then later I found that a photograph was actually posted on findagrave.com, and so that was a great resource for me. So there's a myriad of websites, and they're all in my book if you have that. If you don't have that, if you email me, I'll send you a list of some great websites to look at, okay? All right. Okay, now the main thing I wanted to touch on today is the oral interview, because that's going to be your most important part of genealogy. An oral interview is going to get you grounded. You can use it to research in your family history, and you should do the oral interview very early in your research, because information that you don't know, if you do your oral interview, then you're going to come up with a lot of other information for your family tree. So what you want to do is you want to sit your parents down. You want to just pick their brain and get everything they know. Who were their brothers and sisters? Where did they live? When did they move? What was their migration pattern like? Okay, when you do your oral interview, one of the good tips is to talk to two people at the same time that grew up together. For me, it was talking to my mother and my aunt. Because believe me, if you get two people in the same room together and you're asking questions, right, soon they forget you were there and they start talking about what they went through growing up, and you're feverishly taking notes. Hopefully you have a recorder going so that you get all that information on your oral history, and you can add to your family tree. Let's talk about how to actually interview somebody. What I like to do is talk about icebreakers. Take coffee or juice. If you're going to go visit grandma, take her something to kind of break the ice. If you want to record it, make sure that that's okay with her. But try putting the recorder out to the side so that it doesn't interfere with her and she doesn't feel like she has to talk to the camera. She can talk to you. Okay? And what I suggest is that you go, if you have old photographs around the house, take them with you so you can say, Grandma, who's this? What can you tell me about this person? If you don't have documents around the house, and I'm talking about photographs, old newspapers, knowledge with who might have been in the military, all of that kind of information. If you don't have any of that, what you're going to do is you're going to call the person that you're interviewing, or you can email them if you'd like. But you can contact them and let them know that you'd like to interview them, and ask them what documents they might have. Ask them if they have old pictures. Ask them if they have old funeral programs. If they have anything that they would like to share with you. Photographs are great. Death notices, funeral programs are great. So you want to go armed with information that you have, or you are going to want to see what they have. And then you're going to try to make them comfortable. Instead of asking cut and dry questions like, what's your name? Jot that down. What you're going to want to do is ask open-ended questions. Ask them a question that's going to take a bigger answer, because that's where you get all of your information. For example, ask them if they remember the Great Depression. Okay, instead of asking how old were you in the Great Depression and have them try to think of that, what you're going to want to do is say, hey, do you remember the Depression? And they might say, yeah, I was like 7 or 8 years old and I remember this and that. And they take you through the Depression and what happened afterwards. And you can ask them, interject little questions along the way. Like if they bring up somebody in the neighborhood, ask them more about that. Was that one of our cousins or whatever? But anyway, the oral interview is going to get you started on your genealogy. Okay, in my book, Genealogy and Ethnicity, I do have, I believe it's about 100 questions in there that you can use to get you started. Again, they'd be in the book. If you don't have a book, you can get it on Amazon or email me and I'll send you a list of questions. But some of those questions are like, who named you? What's your name? Does your name have a meaning? Ask them about their birthday and the town that they were born in. Ask them about other family members in the area. Ask them who they played with as children, who their favorite relatives were. And here's a little trick. If you ask them who their least favorite relative was, you might get a whole lot of information, because for some reason, people like to talk about people that they didn't care for very much. So you might ask your grandmother or great-grandmother, who's your least favorite person? And she'll start telling you all kinds of stories, and then you've added to your family tree. Ask them if they were ever mentioned in a newspaper. Ask them if anybody in the family was in the military. Ask them about family traditions. Family traditions can usually tell you a lot about your family. Whatever tradition they did, it can give you an idea of where they lived. It can give you an idea of ethnicity. For example, I have a lot of African ancestry in my family. I also have Native American ancestry in my family. What I found out through my oral interview is that my great-great-grandfather, who was Native American, one of the traditions in the family was when somebody passed away, to put a feather in the bucket so that they could get to the other side faster. Now that can give you information on which ethnic group they were from, what tribe they were from. A lot of information you can get by asking about family traditions. So there are a lot of questions you can ask, and I'm going to go over a couple. Well, I've gone over a couple with you, but here are some of the questions that you can ask, and I'll just leave that up for a minute and let you scroll through there in case there's something that catches your eye, or you want to go back and review this video later, okay? Now, one of my best interviews was actually at a cemetery. I took my mom and my aunt to visit my grandmother's cemetery. And like I often say, they forgot that I was even there. And as they stood over each grave, they started to talk about each person that was buried. This was great information to me because they were talking about my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, people that I had never even thought about. And another thing that I learned through that information was that when you're a younger person and you're interviewing an older person, a lot of times they will find things that are they think are too sensitive to share with younger people, so they might not share that with you. And so you want to be respectful of that, be a little bit careful of what you ask. If they don't want to answer it, let it go, okay? But I can tell you that if you have two people together, they're usually going to talk to each other, and you can glean a lot of information from their conversation. Okay, now when you finished your oral interview, you want to make sure that you transcribe it right away. Even if you think you know everything that they said, I can guarantee you that once you go back and read those notes, there are some things that you've forgotten about because you were writing with one hand or listening to certain parts of it and you got distracted and didn't hear that. So you want to transcribe it right away and add whatever you learned to your family tree. Okay, or to a note to follow up on. Another thing that I want to caution you about is when you're doing your oral history or family research, a lot of times there are nicknames that come up. So if you can, while you're doing your oral interview, try to figure out what the given name was for that nickname. For example, I interviewed my father, and he told me all the names of his brothers, okay? He had Uncle Bud, he had Uncle Son, he had Big Baby, and they all had Junebug. Sound familiar? Okay, so they had all these different nicknames. And so, I said, well, was his name Bud? And my dad said, no, his name was Henry. And, he went through and, told me that Big Baby's name was actually Ione. So, depending on your family background and your family history, you might have a lot of nicknames. So, what you're going to want to do is go through those and try to get some clarity on what the given name was for that nickname. And while you're getting clarity, you might also get more family history. Maybe they'll tell you why they called Uncle Bud Uncle Son. And maybe they'll tell you why they called Ione Big Baby. So it can give rise to a lot of other information that you can use in your research. Now also, when you're doing your oral interview, you don't want to forget to interview people that you might not think have very much information. For example, older brothers and sisters, older cousins, even if they're not that much older than you. They might have a lot of information that you don't have. For example, my sister is 10 years older than me. She was born in Arkansas, where my parents were born, and so she knows a lot about my ancestors that lived in Arkansas. Actually, I have a brother that's 4 years older than me and a brother that's 8 years older than me. They know a lot more about my parents than I do. So don't leave out those older brothers and sisters when you start doing your oral interview. Don't leave out the cousins that you might have. You got an older cousin that might be 10, 12 years older than you are. Maybe your grandmother or great-grandmother was somebody she remembered. Maybe that older cousin was still here when your grandparent or great-grandparent or whoever whatever the case may be. It could be a parent. Maybe they know a lot more than you do. So don't leave out the younger people when you start doing your oral interview, because you'd be surprised at how much they might know. A lot of times they're a wealth of information. Another thing about that, since they are closer to your age, they might tell you a little bit about the family secrets that they know, but the older people don't know that they know, you know? Right. Okay, so you want to interview everybody you can think of in the family that might have information that you need. Okay, everybody, thanks for bearing with me today. That concludes the introduction to genealogy. Hopefully you got a lot out of that. But as I said, I can always be contacted by email, or if you're watching this video on YouTube, just reach down, get my email address, and go ahead and email me. Again, my book, 10 Generations of Bondage, which is my own family history, and also genealogy and ethnicity. Those can both be found on Amazon.com. I also wrote a book called People versus Chester Tyson, which talks about one of my family members that were sentenced to hang for a murder in Louisiana. So if you're interested in all of that or any of that, you will find that on Amazon.com. Okay? So thanks for listening. My next video will be about using the census and how you use the census to further your genealogy. I'll show you what is on each census and what you should be looking for your family. Okay? Everybody be safe. Take care. Bye now.